Hi, this is Ian Bain from SEN ICT, and thank you for joining us for this video about switch skills progression. In this video we're going to look specifically at switch building activities and why there's some controversy about how useful they are for people who are beginning their journey with switches. Before we begin, it's important that we understand why we need switch building activities. Switch building was a label given to a particular level of skills development, and that level was described way back 20 odd years ago as a moving on from simple cause and effect, press a switch and get a reward. And it went like this, that a student would press a switch a number of times to complete a sequence. And what I had in my head at the time was completing a number of tasks before you got the eventual reward for that. And the example here on screen is making a jam sandwich. So there are 5 steps to this. The first, we need to get some bread. Step 2, we need to put some jam on our bread. Step 3, we need to put the 2 slices together. Step 4, we need to cut it. And step 5, we have the reward of eating our sandwich. So switch building became a logical next step for a child who'd mastered the 4 different methods of cause and effect. Pressing a switch and holding it, pressing a switch and letting it go, pressing a switch again over and over in order to keep something going, and pressing a switch to turn something on or off. This next step's needed because it's required for switch scanning. We'll be required to press the switch a number of times and notice that some things are changing on the screen when we do that. Here's an example from one of the programs on our website. I'll select 2 switches. So we need to press the left switch a number of times in order to make a choice. Each press highlights the next available choice. Let's choose the pink box.
I wrote to the zoo to send me a pet.
So switch building begins to model this process of pressing a switch a number of times and things changing on the screen. Over the years that was translated into pressing a switch a number of times in order to build a picture or a scene. And typically most people taught that skill with programs from the Switch It series from Inclusive Technology. For this example I'm going to use the Inclusive Technology Switch It Farm, largely because most people will be familiar with it. I'm going to go into the options and I'm going to go to picture builds and subjects, and let's choose the cow. So I'm going to turn all of these off. When I click play, the program will start. You can see at the bottom of the screen a red switch prompt. Of course we could change that to match the colour of the switch the child's using, although there's little value in doing that unless the child's actually able to match colour. So with the first press of the switch we're presented with a cow's head. The question is, how do I know that's a cow? Now that's a real question. I've asked this many times in audiences of workshops that I've done around the world. And almost invariably people tell me, well, it looks like a cow. It's got big ears, a large nose and horns. And I remind them that some cows don't have those features. What we're seeing on screen is actually a cartoon representation of a cow. One of my favourite answers from asking audiences that question was a gentleman who sat at the back, put his hand up and said, "Because I've had experience of cows." And actually, he's correct. The question for us as educators or therapists is, does the young person we're working with have that same experience of cow? Are they able to see a cow from any angle and know that it's a cow? Do they know that that cartoon image that's on the screen is a cow? Because if they don't, it's just something which has appeared on the screen and they don't know what it is. Add into that mix that we've changed the rules. The child has already built up an understanding that when they press the switch, something pleasurable will happen. And of course, now it doesn't. When they press the switch, some image appears on the screen. When they press it again, another image appears on the screen, but they don't know what that image is. And believe me, standing behind them and going, "What do you think it is?" and signing cow isn't really helping. How do we know what we see on the screen is a cow is an important question. Because these are all cows. A jumping cow, a cartoon cow, a cow's nose, a sign or symbol for cow, a cow's bottom, a dot-to-dot cow, and our same cow from Switchett Farm, but in different angles. These are all cows, but how do we know they're cows? Well, we know they're cows because our brain has built a model of cow. Through a lifetime of experiences, we've built a model of everything that might be a cow. Different shapes from different angles. We've seen them on TV, we've seen them in books, we've seen them in real life. We have, as that gentleman explained, experience of cows. When faced with situations like this, the child will revert to something that they know works, and that is pressing the switch. So we'll see them press the switch over and over again in an effort to try and trigger the reward they know should happen. And this is the result. We end up going back to tap, 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 tap on the switch. The child ignores the images that come up each time they press it, wanting only the end reward. Many of our students will come to switch building fresh from building their understanding of cause and effect. That is, they press a switch and they're given a reward. And the two things are intrinsically linked. The child presses the switch, the reward happens. With switch building, all of that changes. The child now has to press the switch a set number of times before they get the reward, and this is often confusing. So the child will press the switch and continue pressing the switch, waiting for the reward. And you can see that I pressed the switch there maybe 10, 15 times before anything meaningful happened on the screen. And of course, this is exactly what we saw with students in school. We would give them switch building programs, and many of them would revert back to this tapping behaviour in order to trigger the reward that they know should happen. One of the ways program designers tried to get around this problem was to introduce an enforced wait. That means when you've pressed the switch prompt will disappear for a short while in order that you will look at and engage with the screen. The switch prompt will then pop back up again on the screen. You press the switch and move on. Take close note of the switch at the bottom of the screen. See how it's disappeared. The reason it's removed from the screen is to encourage the student not to press the switch and watch the animation. Of course, this fails spectacularly with most students. Children take very little or no interest in switch prompts whatsoever. What happened in reality was the children went back to what they know. Tap, tap, tap in an effort to try and trigger the reward that they expect should happen when they press the switch. A huge part of the problem was that the child didn't actually understand the images that were being presented on the screen. They couldn't work out that that cow's head, was part of a cow. In order to try and overcome this, the program was changed yet again. This time they used outlines and used parts of the object to fill in that outline in an effort to help the child understand that they were building a picture of a cow. You can see from the screen that that is probably just as, if not more, complex. Outlines were not the answer. The underlying problem was the child was unable to identify the picture or make any sense of the image that was coming on the screen because they were unable to identify a picture from parts of a picture. And when you consider this, that's not unexpected. The child's here. They've just developed an understanding of cause and effect. They're able to press a switch and engage with and take some pleasure from the reward they generated. That's a very, very low level of learning. And yet, in order to complete this simple activity, we're asking them to do this. which is identify an object from parts of that object, which in terms of learning is a long way down that road. So how can we solve the problem? Well, some companies and some activities use scenes rather than parts of an individual image. With each press, a scene is built up. In the example on the screen, each press builds up a farm scene, a field, a hill, a tree, another tree, a tractor, and then a reward. Let's look at this example in SendSwitcher. I'm going to choose the farm level. Click Go. Each time I press the switch, a new part of the picture will be built. Ground, hill, tree, another tree, tractor, and with the final press, the scene will animate. And while it does go some way to solve our problem of identifying elements of the picture, it's not particularly ideal. It's difficult to talk about the elements that are used to build up the page. A hill, another hill, a tree, another tree, a tractor, and then the reward. It would be much better if those elements were easier to describe. Now that's not always easy. We have to be able to describe the things that are on the screen. With a scene like this where we're building a farm landscape, that's relatively simple, but you'll find that many of the switch building programs that are currently available on the market are based around patterns, and that's very much more difficult to describe. Here's an example with SendSwitcher that requires 5 presses to build a tunnelling pattern. I'll just change the background colour to yellow. A circle, another circle, another circle, and another circle, and yet another circle. Five-press pattern activities like this can be useful, but there is a great danger that the child will simply tap, 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 tap on the switch in order to get to the reward, because it's very difficult for them to notice that something has changed on the screen with every press. It's also very difficult for us to point out those changes or to describe them to the child. Another way might be to use activities where there's a build of anticipation before the reward. This is 3-press cause and effect objects from SendSwitcher. Let's choose one of them. How about the balloon? So I'm presented with a blank screen. With the first switch press, there's a balloon. The next switch press, the balloon gets bigger and bigger again. And with the final switch press, the balloon animates. It's far better to use images that the child might actually be able to relate to, and to use those images to tell a story. This helps us overcome the describing problem. So in this example, I've got 5 pictures. Here's our class. We're all getting on the bus. I wonder where we're going. Oh, we're going to the garden centre. I've never quite understood what special schools' affinity with garden centres are, especially as most of my class would like to eat almost all of the plants. We had an ice cream, and then we came back to school. You can create simple stories like this using some of the older software like Switchit Maker, or you could pop them into PowerPoint and use PowerPoint. Just make sure your switch interface is set to send a mouse click rather than a space. Or you could use one of the stories that's built into programs like Switchit Farm, Switchit Animals. I'm going to select stories with picture menus and I'm going to click play. And the story I would like is
the fox.
The fox story. Again, we start with a blank screen and our switch prompt. At the first press, we see some chickens. There's no language in this program, which allows you to inject that language depending upon the level of understanding of the student you're working with. For some that might be, look, chickens. For others it might be, how many chickens can we see? 1, 2, 3. We then encourage the child to press the switch again, Uh-oh, who's this? Somebody else has joined our story. It's a fox. I wonder what the fox is going to do. Oh no, he's grabbed one of the chickens. Oh heavens, I wonder what's going to happen. Let's have some more story. Here comes a dog. He's barking and growling at the fox. I wonder what the dog's going to do. Let's find out. Oh look, he's chased the fox away and the chicken has run to safety. And for our final reward for pressing the switch a number of times, the dog does a lovely dance for us. When I work with schools, I talk a lot about the word meaningful, and that's using technology in ways which is meaningful to the student themselves. Having an activity that puts images on the screen that the child can't understand and requiring them to press a switch a number of times, stopping to look at something on the screen that they don't understand, makes very little sense. Telling a story in this way is far more meaningful to the student because there's a very good chance that they will relate to what happened in that story. It's important to remember that switch building isn't about developing and increasing the number of times the child can press the switch. Can they press it once? Can they press it 3 times? And I've seen this in many schools that I've visited where a child will have a target such as will press a switch 5 times to complete a sequence. The number is not important at all. What's really important for the child is that they notice that something has changed when they press the switch. And that involves using images on the screen to which the child will be able to recognise and relate to, prompting them to notice that those things have changed, and building up this awareness that they need to complete a very simple sequence in order to achieve that reward that they're seeking. The skill here isn't that the child is able to press the switch an ever-increasing number of times. It's simply that the child needs to notice that something changes on the screen every time they press the switch. This helps build an understanding that the child will need to press a switch a number of times in order to complete a simple sequence, which models pressing a switch with switch scanning. We may need to help the child with some of that. That means pausing after every switch press to engage a child with the screen. Look, what can we see? And once we're sure that the child has noticed those changes, move on again for the next switch press until the eventual reward. Personally, I have real problems with switch building. I've seen so many children in schools all around the world happily tapping away at a switch with a switch building activity without any understanding at all of what's on the screen or why they're doing it. Switch building is useful, but it needs to be used with caution. So I'd just like to finish by saying thank you very much for watching. A special thank you to people who support me through Patreon, and look out for more training videos in the coming weeks and months.